The wedding dress didn't belong to me. Neither did the ring, the flowers, or the life I was about to step into. I stared at my reflection in the floor-length mirror of the bridal suite at the Callahan estate, surrounded by antique lace, magnolia-scented air, and expectations that weren't mine. "You'll be fine, Lena," my mother said, tugging a pearl earring into place on my left ear like I was a mannequin, not a daughter. "All you have to do is smile. Walk straight. Say I do, then disappear." Her voice was soft, but the edge was there, southern sweet with a bite of steel. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had locked. My hands trembled in white satin gloves. Not because I was nervous about marrying a man I'd never truly met, but because I wasn't even meant to be the bride. Chloe was. My sister had vanished 3 days ago. No calls. No explanations. Just a note slipped under my door back in Atlanta. I can't live the life she planned for me. I'm sorry. She meant our mother, of course. Vivian Whitmore, queen of curated appearances and whispered deals, had spent the last year preparing Chloe for this wedding like a high-stakes transaction. She didn't cry when Chloe disappeared. She didn't panic. She simply turned to me and said, "You'll take her place." And I said yes. Not because I'm brave, but because I always say yes. The quiet one. The obedient one. The shadow of the golden girl. And because 6 months ago, when Chloe got tired of phone calls with Grant Callahan, the blind tech mogul who'd lost his sight in a car accident, but somehow grew his company even more after, Vivian had handed me the phone instead. "Your voice is softer. He won't know the difference." She was wrong. He knew something. I could feel it in the way he paused after I laughed too gently, the way he sometimes asked the same question twice, like testing me. Still, I learned his rhythms. I memorized his preferences, his voice when he was tired, the exact cadence of his laugh. I learned him in ways Chloe never bothered to. Now, I was marrying him in her place. The ceremony was in the rose garden behind the Callahan mansion, the heart of Savannah's old wealth. The kind of place where every hedge was trimmed with surgical precision and every window was designed for watching, not looking out, but looking in. Rows of white chairs faced an arch of hanging jasmine. A string quartet played something elegant and restrained. The entire thing was being live-streamed to business investors and social partners. A wedding and a brand announcement rolled into one. I stood at the top of the garden path, the veil over my face trembling with the breeze. A staff member gestured. My cue. I took one step, then another. Grant stood at the end of the aisle, tall, composed. A black tailored suit, sunglasses concealing eyes that hadn't seen in 3 years. His posture was perfect, hands clasped in front of him, head slightly tilted, as if he could hear everything the wind was trying to say. I couldn't read his face, but something in me tightened. My heart pounded. Would he notice? Would he call it off? Instead, when I reached him, he extended his hand slowly. I placed mine in his, careful not to let him feel how cold my fingers were. "You're trembling," he said quietly. "I'm just overwhelmed," I whispered. A pause. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. The ceremony moved forward. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped on. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Grant leaned in gently, touched his lips to my cheek, not my mouth, and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "You don't wear Chloe's perfume." My breath hitched. Applause. Flashbulbs, 1,000 eyes. None of it felt real. I smiled. I posed. I stood beside a man who wasn't truly mine, in a life that wasn't truly mine, and I wondered how long I could keep this up before it all cracked. Later, at the reception in the grand ballroom, chandeliers glowing like constellations frozen in time, I sat beside him at the head table. I barely touched my food. He said little. But every so often, he'd tilt his head and breathe in like he was trying to catch something intangible. "Do you enjoy music, Lena?" he asked suddenly. The use of my name, my real name, not Chloe, made my stomach turn. "Yes," I said. "Piano, mostly." He nodded slowly. Chloe hated piano. Found it melancholy. I swallowed. "I think melancholy can be beautiful." His mouth quirked, just the faintest hint of a smile. "So do I." The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was something else. A waiting. A test. He was listening not just to my voice, but to the spaces between my words. When the guests had gone, and the lights dimmed, we left for the Callahan home, just outside the city. A private waterfront estate near the marshlands, with a long stone path and a porch that faced the river. The limousine ride there was quiet. Grant didn't speak until we turned onto the private road. "You feel different," he said. I turned to him. "Different how?" "Lighter. More hesitant." Chloe was never hesitant. I stared out the window, voice barely above a breath. Maybe the day got to me. Another long pause. Then, "Your laugh was softer. Your hand trembled. Your scent was unfamiliar. And still," he turned his head slightly toward me, "you felt right." The lights of the estate flickered in the distance. Spanish moss swayed like ghosts in the night. "I may not see faces anymore," he continued, "but I see other things. The shift in a voice, the stillness before a lie, the sincerity behind silence." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest felt too tight. We arrived at the estate. The doors opened silently. Delilah greeted us with her usual warm, quiet presence. She looked at me once, long and kind, like she knew and didn't judge. In the grand foyer, Grant stopped walking. He turned toward me. "If you ever want to tell me the truth," he said, "you won't need to explain why." Then he walked up the stairs, cane tapping lightly on each polished wooden step, leaving me standing alone beneath the chandelier, my heart no longer cold, but aching with a heat I didn't know what to do with. I had married a man as a lie, and he was already seeing straight through me. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The morning after the wedding, Savannah was quiet, in a way that made the world feel paused. Light slipped gently through the gauzy curtains of the guest room, I now called mine, though nothing about it felt like mine. The walls were painted a soft linen white, accented with vintage gold sconces. A small vase of gardenias sat on the side table, fresh, perfect, arranged like someone had planned this moment down to the flower. I sat at the edge of the bed, still in my nightgown, trying to memorize the rhythm of the house. Somewhere downstairs I heard the soft clink of porcelain. A door creaked. A clock chimed faintly in the hallway. Every sound felt louder in this silence. I hadn't slept. Grant's words from the night before replayed in my head on a loop. If you ever want to tell me the truth, you won't need to explain why. He wasn't pushing me. That was the part that scared me most. He was patient, kind, and I was lying to him every second I stayed. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts. "Mrs. Callahan?" Delilah's voice was gentle, like the rustle of silk. "Breakfast is in the solarium." I stood quickly, pressing my palms to the fabric of my nightgown. "I'll be right down." She nodded once and closed the door with the same grace she always had. I dressed in silence. Pale blue blouse, cream skirt, no perfume. Downstairs, the solarium was filled with early light. Sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting delicate patterns across the marble floor. Grant sat at the table, already dressed, already composed. He wore a slate-grey sweater and dark slacks, his posture upright, a hand curled gently around a steaming mug. He turned his head slightly when he heard my footsteps. "Good morning." "Morning," I said, folding my hands together before sitting across from him. "I hope the room was comfortable." It was. I paused. "Everything's beautiful here." "Too beautiful sometimes," he said, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I don't miss color the way people assume. I miss moments, the way light used to bounce off the water, or how the sky turns orange just before a storm." I looked at him for a long moment, trying to imagine seeing the world the way he did now. "That sounds lonely." "Not always," he said. "Sometimes it's quieter this way. I can hear more." Delilah entered, setting down a tray of warm cornbread, fresh fruit, and honeyed tea. She placed my cup on the left. Grant sat on the right. He reached for his without hesitation. "You didn't sleep much," he said casually, like commenting on the weather. I blinked. "What makes you say that?" "You hesitated when you sat down. Your breath was shallow, and you're stirring your tea with your left hand instead of your right." I looked down at the spoon in my fingers. "You're very observant," I murmured. "I have to be," he replied, his tone calm but direct. "Some people see everything and understand nothing. I can't afford that luxury anymore." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with unspoken words. Before I could think of a response, the sliding glass door opened and a figure stepped into the solarium. A man, tall, sharp-featured, dressed like he was used to being noticed, walked in with a confident air. "Morning," he said smoothly, glancing between us. "I didn't realize I was interrupting breakfast." Grant's brow furrowed slightly. "Trent?" "I thought you were flying to D.C. this morning." "Flight got pushed," he said, stepping closer. His eyes flicked to me. "You must be Chloe." I froze. Grant said nothing. "Yes," I said quietly. "Nice to meet you." Trent's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Likewise, though I'll admit, you look a little different from your photos." I stiffened. Grant's voice cut through, low and steady. "Trent." His cousin raised both hands in mock surrender. "Just making conversation. Relax." Then, to me, "I help manage the estate and certain family logistics. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." "Thank you," I replied, not meeting his eyes. He gave a quick nod to Grant. "We'll talk later," and exited without another word. I kept my eyes on the table. My heart was pounding. Grant said nothing for a moment. "He's direct," he finally said. I nodded, unsure how much more I could take. "I've known Trent a long time," he continued. "He doesn't believe in softness. That's why he'll never understand how to lead anything meaningful." I looked up. "You believe softness is a strength?" He turned toward the window. "In a world full of noise and performance, yes." Something in my chest ached. I picked up my tea. It was warm, familiar, comforting. "Would you—" he began, then paused. "Would you walk with me?" "Now?" "There's a spot by the marsh I'd like to visit. I haven't been there since—" He stopped himself. "Since before." I nodded, rising. "Of course." We walked in silence along the gravel path that curved gently toward the water. The air was thick with the scent of salt and magnolia. Cicadas hummed softly in the distance. He held my arm, not tightly, just enough to keep balance, and I adjusted my pace to match his. "Tell me something true," he said suddenly. I blinked. "What?" "Something real, about you." "No performance." I hesitated. Then, "I used to sketch people on the train. Just strangers." It helped with the anxiety. Drawing their expressions made me feel less invisible. He was quiet for a few steps. "Do you still draw?" "Not in a while," I admitted. Life got busy. Other people's plans became more important. He nodded slowly. "I remember Chloe mentioning you were the quiet one." My breath caught. "I wasn't sure she meant it as a compliment," he added. "She didn't." The wind stirred the marsh reeds. We stopped at a bench overlooking the water. Grant tilted his head toward the sound of the breeze. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "The wind?" "No. The way it changes when it passes through something old, like it remembers." I closed my eyes, let the wind touch my face. And for just a second, I let go of the name I'd been pretending to wear. I was Lena again, not Chloe. Not the substitute, just me. "I don't want to lie to you," I whispered. He turned his head slightly, facing me without seeing. "Then don't." "But if I told you everything, I don't know what you'd think of me." "I already think something of you," he said softly. "And I'm still here." The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of the sea and memory, and maybe something new. I sat beside him, heart full and terrified, and realized I was already falling. And he might have been waiting for me to stop pretending all along. The air inside the Callahan estate felt colder after our walk, as if the walls themselves had overheard too much. I lingered by the grand staircase, unsure whether to retreat upstairs or find some excuse to stay near Grant a little longer. He paused near the base of the stairs, fingers brushing the polished banister. "Thank you for walking with me," he said, his voice low but sincere. I turned slightly. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do," he replied. "Most people offer help because they think I need it." "You didn't. You just stayed close." He took a step upward, then paused. "I'm going to my study. There's a piano there. If you hear something strange, it's just me trying to remember what keys feel like." I nodded, forgetting for a moment he couldn't see me. "I'd like to hear you play." There was the faintest smile on his lips before he turned and disappeared up the stairs. I stood in the silence a moment longer before heading into the library. It was a place I hadn't explored yet. Delilah had mentioned it once, in passing, with a sort of reverent hush. "No one's touched it since the accident," she'd said, placing silverware with gentle precision. "He used to spend hours in there." I opened the door slowly. It smelled of cedar and old paper. The floor was dark mahogany, scuffed in places where chairs had once slid back and forth. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with hardbound volumes, each one like a monument to a life before now. A large desk sat under the tall, arched window, facing the marshlands. Dust shimmered in the sunlight that filtered through the panes, making everything feel suspended in time. I stepped in carefully, not wanting to disturb anything, and my eyes caught a sketchbook on the corner of the desk. Not new. Worn at the edges, the cover cracked. I hesitated, then lifted the corner. Inside were pencil drawings, beautiful, detailed sketches, faces full of movement. A girl laughing in a garden, a young boy holding a kite, an older man adjusting a bow tie in the mirror. Every page carried emotion, captured in fine lines and delicate shading. This was Grant's world before sight left him. I traced the edge of a drawing without touching it. "He used to leave notes." Delilah's voice came softly from the doorway. "On the first page of every book he gave someone. Said it made the gift feel personal." I turned, startled. She stood with a folded linen cloth in her hands, her presence as quiet as breath. "I didn't mean to intrude," I whispered. She stepped forward slowly, her gaze scanning the room with a sort of sadness. "You're not intruding, you're learning." I swallowed. "He doesn't talk about this room." "No," she said, placing the cloth down. "He stopped coming here after the surgery failed, said it was too cruel to sit in a room full of things he could no longer see." I looked down at the sketchbook again. "He was talented." "He still is," she said gently. "He just hasn't found a way to express it again." A pause settled between us before she added, "That's why he started building devices for others. Medical tech. Tools that help people read again, paint again, move again. Maybe he thought if he helped others see, he wouldn't miss it so much himself." My throat tightened. "Would it be okay if I cleaned the room?" I asked. "Maybe open a window? Dust the shelves. Let some light back in." Delilah's eyes softened. "I think it would mean more than you know." She left me alone, and I spent the next hour gently clearing the dust from the desk, straightening books, wiping the window glass. I didn't rearrange anything, just restored what was already there. The library didn't need changing. It just needed to be remembered. By late afternoon, the sun cast golden light across the floor. I stood in the center, breathing in the scent of old wood and paper, and felt something stir. A quiet peace I hadn't felt in years, like I belonged somewhere, if only briefly. Behind me, the door creaked open. "I haven't heard this door open in a while," Grant said, his voice catching on the last word. I turned. He stood there, one hand resting lightly on the doorframe, the other holding his cane. "I didn't mean to cross a boundary," I said quickly. "Delilah." "It's all right," he interrupted. I heard the window open, and the scent, lemon oil and lavender. I nodded again, forgetting. "You cleaned," he said. I just thought, maybe this room deserved to breathe again. He stepped forward slowly, his cane tapping once against the floor, then stilled. His fingers brushed the corner of the desk. He paused. "I used to sit here every morning," he said quietly, coffee on the left, sketchpad open. Windows wide. I watched him take in the space with everything but his eyes. "I saw the drawings," I whispered. "They're beautiful." He didn't respond for a moment. Then he said, "Most people look at them and say I must miss it terribly. Do you?" He smiled faintly. "Not always. But sometimes, yes. It's like losing the ability to speak a language you once knew by heart." I moved closer. "You don't have to stop speaking it. Maybe just find a new dialect." He turned slightly toward me, his expression unreadable. "I'm not good with metaphors," he said. "You just used one," I smiled. That earned a soft chuckle. "I didn't think I'd ever come back in here," he said. "But it feels different." I wanted to say it wasn't the room that had changed, but him. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Would you let me read to you sometime? Something from your shelves?" A pause. Then, "I'd like that." We stood there, in the quiet heart of the house, surrounded by things long untouched. And I realized the central conflict of my life wasn't the lie I was living. It was the truth I was afraid to step into, Not just with Grant, but with myself. I didn't want to disappear after a few months. I didn't want to be a placeholder in someone else's story. I wanted this, whatever this was between us, to be real. But to have that, I'd have to give him all of me. Not just the name I wore, but the voice behind it. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Rain came softly that evening, as if the sky didn't want to interrupt. It pattered gently against the tall windows of the music room, blending into the hush of the estate like a lullaby only the walls could hear. I stood just inside the doorway, watching Grant at the piano. He wasn't playing, just sitting there, fingers resting on the keys, unmoving. The room was dim, lit only by the soft amber glow of a single standing lamp. His posture was relaxed but alert, like he was listening for a note that hadn't yet been played. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked, stepping closer. "The sound of your own music?" He tilted his head slightly. "It's not the sound I miss. It's the feeling of starting something when you don't know how it'll end." I sat down on the bench beside him, close but not touching. "Why don't you try now?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not tonight. Some nights aren't meant for beginnings." A beat passed. Then, as if shifting directions, he asked, "What about you? When did you stop drawing?" I looked down at my hands. I stopped when people stopped asking what I liked and started telling me what I was supposed to become. He turned toward me, his eyes not seeing, but focused nonetheless. "That must have been a quiet kind of heartbreak." "It was," I whispered. "But the kind you're not allowed to grieve out loud." The piano keys beneath his hands stayed untouched, but somehow the silence around us deepened. "You still haven't told me," he said after a long moment. "Told you what?" "Why you agreed to marry me." My breath caught. I wasn't ready for this. Not yet. Grant didn't push, but the question lingered in the air like a chord left unresolved. Before I could think of an answer, the door to the music room creaked open and Delilah entered quietly, holding a small silver tray. "I brought tea," she said, setting it on the nearby side table. "Thought you both might need something warm." I smiled at her gratefully. "Thank you." As she turned to go, Grant spoke again. "Delilah, you've worked here longer than anyone. What do you think makes someone trustworthy?" She paused, not startled, just thoughtful. "Consistency," she said. "It's not about grand gestures. It's about what stays the same when no one's watching." Then she glanced at me, her eyes kind, and left us alone. I poured the tea carefully, one for me, one for him. I placed his on the right, out of habit. But then I paused and moved it to the left. Grant's hand reached out, found the handle without searching. He smiled faintly. "You remembered?" "Of course." He took a sip, then placed the cup down. His fingers lingered on the saucer. "Chloe never remembered," he said softly. "She said she was too busy to notice the little things." I didn't move. He continued. "I used to think maybe I asked for too much. That noticing small things was a luxury other people didn't have time for." I finally spoke. "I think noticing the small things is how love begins." His jaw tightened, like my words had struck something deeper than I intended. Then he said, "Tell me something else." "What do you mean?" "Another truth. About you, not Chloe, not the story you've been given. Just you." My mouth went dry. My heart beat loud in my chest. "I used to write letters I never sent," I said. to people who never saw me. It helped me feel like I existed. Grant turned his head toward me. "Did you write one to me?" I froze. "Yes," I said finally, so quietly I wasn't sure he heard. "What did it say?" I looked down at my hands. It said, "I didn't expect you to notice me. That I didn't expect you to remember the girl behind the voice. And yet here we are," he whispered. We sat in silence for a moment longer. Then he lifted his hand, slowly, gently, and let it hover near mine on the bench. Not touching, waiting. I moved my hand just slightly until our fingers barely brushed. It was enough. He exhaled, slow and quiet. "You're not Chloe," he said. The words hung in the air. My whole body tensed. I couldn't breathe. "I've known for a while," he added. "Not exactly when, but the way you speak, it's not hers. There's warmth in your silences, and grief in your laughter. She never had either." I pulled my hand back. "I was going to tell you," I whispered. He nodded. "I know. You're not angry?" "I was," he said. "But not for the reasons you think." I turned to him, heart pounding. "Then why?" "Because you thought you had to pretend to be someone else just to be worthy of being seen." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. "I didn't mean to deceive you. I believe you," he said. "But I also need you to believe me when I say, I saw you, even before I knew your name." My breath trembled. "You don't even know who I am," I said. "Then tell me," he replied. "Start with your real name." I opened my mouth. Then a sudden noise outside, loud laughter, heels on stone, interrupted the moment. A voice floated in from the front entry, too familiar to mistake. "Oh, don't be so formal. I practically own half the wine in this house, Chloe." I froze. Grant's brow lifted slightly. "Did I just hear?" "Yes," I whispered. The front door closed. High heels clacked across the marble floor. Another voice joined hers. My mother. They were here. I stood from the bench, heart thudding. "What are you going to do?" Grant asked calmly. I stared at the door, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to disappear like I had never existed. But instead, I straightened my back. "I'm going to stop pretending," I said, and I walked out to meet them. The sound of Chloe's heels striking marble echoed down the hallway like a warning bell. I moved through the corridor with deliberate calm, even as my pulse scrambled in my chest. The air was suddenly thicker, perfumed with tension, and the kind of cold sweetness only my mother could carry into a room. I turned the corner just as they stepped into the foyer. Chloe was flawless, of course. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, her makeup fresh despite the humidity, and her smile, sharp and wide, landed on me like a threat wrapped in charm. "Well," she said, her eyes sweeping over me like I was part of the furniture. That didn't take long. Behind her, Vivian Whitmore stood tall in a beige silk dress, every inch the Southern matriarch, handbag hooked neatly on her wrist. She didn't look surprised, just mildly inconvenienced. "Mother," I said, voice steady. She tilted her head. "You didn't answer your phone." I didn't feel like it. Chloe's laughter was light and cutting. "Looks like someone's grown a little spine since I left." I didn't reply. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of flinching. Vivian stepped closer, her tone low and laced with implication. "We need to talk, privately." "No," I said, "not this time." Her eyes narrowed. "I'll speak where I choose," I added. "This is my house now, isn't it?" There was a pause. A breath, a calculation behind her gaze. "You've gone too far," she said. "I haven't gone anywhere," I answered. "You're the ones who showed up without warning." Chloe tossed her bag onto the antique console table like she owned the place. "You were supposed to hold the role, not rewrite it." "I didn't rewrite anything," I said, heat rising in my chest. "You abandoned it." She stepped forward, her tone growing colder. "You think you belong here. You think just because you played house with Grant and read a few books in his library, you're suddenly worthy of this life?" "Chloe," came Grant's voice from behind me. It cut through the air like a sudden change in weather. She blinked, her mouth parting slightly. He stood at the far end of the hall, calm, composed, his cane in one hand, the other tucked into the pocket of his gray sweater. His eyes, though unseeing, were turned toward us with uncanny precision. "You're back," he said. Chloe hesitated, then smiled. "I thought I'd surprise you." "You did." Silence bloomed like smoke. Vivian stepped forward. "Grant, surely you understand the importance of clearing up this confusion before it damages anything further. We can make a quiet transition. No one has to know." "I know," he interrupted. Her voice faltered. "You... what?" "I know she's not Chloe." A breath caught in Chloe's throat. He turned toward me then, and though his eyes didn't meet mine in the way a sighted man's would, I felt fully seen. Not exposed, not ashamed, seen. "I've known for some time," he continued, "and I've been waiting for the truth to arrive on its own." My mother's face tightened, her voice turning sharp. "Grant, this is a legal issue." "She signed those papers under false pretenses." "She signed them as herself," he said calmly. "Her name is on them. Her voice in every call. Her actions in every room of this house." Vivian's lips parted in protest, but nothing came out. "And as for trust," he turned his head slightly. "Lena has shown me more truth in her quiet moments than I've seen in years of perfectly rehearsed ones." Chloe's composure fractured. "So that's it? You'd choose her? A substitute? A girl who was never supposed to be more than a placeholder?" Grant didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. She didn't ask to be chosen. She just stayed. Something broke in Chloe's expression, barely visible, but there. A flicker of something behind the mask. "I gave up everything," she said. "I walked away because I was drowning. You don't know what that felt like." Grant nodded. "No, I don't." "But you didn't come back because you missed me. You came back because you missed what I represented." Chloe didn't deny it. Vivian looked between us, calculating her next move. "This doesn't have to become messy," she said, smoothing the front of her dress. Grant smiled faintly. "It's not messy. It's just honest." The silence that followed was not loud, but it was final. Vivian straightened her shoulders. "We'll be at the Peachtree Inn until Sunday. If you decide to come to your senses, we'll be reachable." Then she turned, heels clicking against the tile like punctuation. Chloe didn't move. Her eyes met mine for the first time, not in confrontation, but in something that looked almost like understanding. "I didn't think you'd last this long," she said. "Neither did I replied. She nodded once. "Careful. The longer you stay, the harder it is to pretend you don't want to." Then she walked away. When the door finally clicked shut behind them, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Grant stood silent at the end of the hallway. I walked toward him slowly, each step loosening something tight inside me. When I reached him, he tilted his head. "Are you all right?" he asked. I nodded. I think, for the first time, yes. His hand reached for mine. I met it halfway. You didn't run, he said. I almost did, I whispered. But then I remembered the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand still. He squeezed my hand gently. You stood still, he said. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't the only one who had learned to see in the dark. The next morning, the estate felt quieter than usual, like even the house was holding its breath. I stood by the window in the drawing room, watching the light spill across the garden. The rain from the night before had softened everything. The brick path glistened. The jasmine vines leaned into the air like they were stretching after sleep. There was a stillness outside that hadn't quite found its way inside me yet. Behind me, I heard Grant's footsteps. He didn't use his cane in the house anymore unless he was on the stairs. He knew every step by sound, by breath, by memory. He always had. I thought you'd be sleeping in, he said gently. I couldn't, I replied, not turning from the window. The silence kept getting louder. He moved closer, stopping a few feet behind me. That's how I know something's changed. I glanced at him over my shoulder. How? When silence no longer brings peace, it usually means a truth has arrived. I looked away, swallowing the lump in my throat. We hadn't talked about it yet. Not really. The night before had been a turning point. One I hadn't planned, one I still wasn't sure how to live inside. They're still in Savannah, I said. Chloe and my mother. I know. You're not worried? No, he said simply. I've already made my choice. I turned toward him fully now. I'm not her, I said. His face was calm. I know. You've known for a while. I have. And yet you let it happen. I didn't let it, he said quietly. I waited. There's a difference. His voice wasn't sharp, but it settled in me like an anchor. I stepped closer, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. Why? He tilted his head. Because I could hear the truth underneath the lie. And sometimes the person beneath the mask is worth the wait. A pause, delicate but charged. I didn't think you'd forgive me, I said. I'm not sure I have, he admitted, not cruelly, just honestly. But I'm trying, because what we have now feels real. And I'd rather build something honest from a broken beginning than live in a perfect lie. I felt tears prick behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I changed the subject. I cleaned the greenhouse this morning. He smiled faintly. The one behind the garden wall? Yes, there was dust on everything, but the light still gets through. There are tulips just starting to come in. He raised an eyebrow. Chloe loved tulips. I know, I said softly. I never did. There was a silence. What do you like then? He asked. Lavender and marigolds? Chrysanthemums, sometimes. I like things that don't need to be noticed to keep blooming. His smile deepened. I'd like to walk there, he said. With you. Now it was my turn to pause. You don't need a guide anymore. No, he said, but I'd still like to hold your hand. That stopped me. The vulnerability in his voice, the gentleness of the request, it undid something inside me. I'll get our coats, I said, voice thick. Outside, the air was crisp but warming. The garden hummed quietly with bees and the soft rustle of leaves. We walked slowly along the path, Grant's hand brushing mine now and then as if asking permission each time. I opened the old wooden door to the greenhouse and stepped inside first. The warmth greeted us like an old friend. Sunlight filtered through the glass roof in golden beams. He followed, pausing just inside the threshold. "Describe it to me," he said. I took a breath. There are rows of raised beds. The soil's rich and dark. In the far left, the tulips are just beginning to open, yellow mostly. But in the back, on the right, there's a patch of lavender, and near the center, chrysanthemums, deep purple, like ink that's almost dried. He smiled. "You brought them here?" "I did," I said. "I wanted something that felt like mine." He stepped forward slowly, one hand grazing the wooden edge of the planter. "I like the way you see the world," he said. "I used to think no one wanted to know how I saw it," I whispered. He turned toward me then. "I do." I looked at him for a long time. And then, slowly, I reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, not tightly, but with certainty. "You said yesterday, I didn't ask to be chosen," I said quietly. "But I think maybe I did. Just not like this. I know. I wanted someone to see me, not because I was loud or perfect, but because I stayed." He nodded. "And I saw you. Even before I knew your name." We stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by growing things. And I realized something important. The heart doesn't always recognize love at first glance. Sometimes it learns it slowly, in silence, in stillness, in the echo of a voice that finally says your name, like it belongs to you. And for the first time, I believed I wasn't just playing a part anymore. I was becoming the person I had always been. The estate's rhythm had changed. It was subtle, but I felt it in the way Grant lingered longer by the piano, or how the staff's voices softened just slightly when they said my name. Not Mrs. Callahan out of politeness, but out of something closer to recognition. The house, once filled with cautious silences and two perfect corners, was slowly becoming lived in. And yet, beneath all that peace, something stirred. It started with a letter. Delilah handed it to me at breakfast, folded perfectly, tucked into an envelope that smelled faintly of rosewater and tension. The handwriting was unmistakable. Vivian Whitmore. I didn't open it at the table. I slid it into the pocket of my cardigan and pretended it didn't burn through the fabric like heat. Grant noticed. Of course he did. "Is everything all right?" he asked, as I stirred my tea clockwise for the third time without sipping it. "It's nothing." He raised a brow. "It's never nothing when you don't touch your toast." I looked up. "It's from my mother." A pause. "Do you want to read it?" "Not yet," I said. I'm afraid I already know what it says. He didn't press. He never did. But the letter waited. And by mid-afternoon, so did I. I found a quiet corner of the library, the same one I'd polished and revived weeks ago, and unfolded the letter like it might shatter in my hands. "Lena, I trust by now you've enjoyed playing dress-up long enough. You've made your point. You've proven your stubbornness. But let's not confuse rebellion with belonging. This charade is nearing its expiration, and while Grant may enjoy your quaint sincerity, the world outside this estate is less forgiving. We've kept your secret. We can just as easily reveal it. Chloe has an engagement offer, one with more visibility, more value. Don't stand in the way of her future or yours. Come to the Peachtree Inn tomorrow at 2 p.m. Let's be civilized about this. Mother." I folded it slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't rip it into pieces or storm into the hallway demanding justice. I just sat there, holding the paper like it held a truth I wasn't ready to face. Because part of me knew She wasn't bluffing. I returned the letter to its envelope and walked out into the hall, where I nearly ran straight into Trent. He caught himself before I did, his hand on the wall. Lena. His voice still had that polished charm, like it had been scrubbed clean before every conversation. I heard Chloe's staying in town, he said casually. Apparently. She's been asking questions. I looked at him. About what? About the trust. About the Callahan shares being released next quarter. My stomach turned just slightly. She never cared about this company, I said. No, he agreed, but Vivian does, and Chloe's nothing if not strategic when she's cornered. I wanted to walk away. But Trent leaned in, lowering his voice just enough to make me listen. They want you out, before Grant signs the final restructuring paperwork. My throat tightened. He hasn't signed yet? He's close. One more board meeting. But if this situation becomes public, you mean if they tell everyone I'm not Chloe? He nodded slowly. They'll make you look like a fraud, and Grant like a fool. I stepped back. Trent didn't look angry. He looked tired, like someone who had seen too many power plays and forgotten what truth looked like. I'm not asking you to leave, he said. But be careful. You're not just fighting for a man. You're fighting against an empire that doesn't lose. He left me standing there, the air too thin around me. That night, I sat on the back porch with Grant. The marsh was still. The sky stretched wide and dark above us, stars blinking through the veil of early spring clouds. I held the letter in my lap. It weighed more than paper should. I want to tell you something, I said. Grant turned slightly, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. I'm listening. They want me gone, Chloe and my mother. I know. I think they're threatening to expose everything if I don't walk away before the trust agreement finalizes. Grant nodded, unsurprised. Why haven't you signed it? I asked. The board is waiting. You're ready. You've built this. He was quiet for a moment. Because I was waiting to see who would still be here if I lost it all. His answer landed like a soft blow. I don't want your money, I whispered. I know, he said. That's why I trust you. I turned to face him fully. I want to stay. Not because of the house, or the business, or what I've come to feel here, but because I'm tired of running from who I really am. His fingers brushed the edge of my chair. Then don't run. A long pause passed between us. The kind of silence that holds a choice inside it. Finally, he said, Will you go see them tomorrow? Yes, I said. Not to make a deal, but to tell them I'm done pretending they own me. He nodded once. Then I'll be here when you come back. And just like that, I wasn't afraid of the morning anymore. The Peachtree Inn looked exactly the way I remembered it. Grand, intentional, suffocating. Every flower in the lobby's centerpiece was positioned like it was auditioning for perfection. The scent of lilacs and polish hung in the air, familiar and oddly cold. I paused at the foot of the staircase, my reflection flickering across the gleaming tile floor, wondering for the briefest second if I should turn around. But I didn't. Room 304. The door was cracked open, just enough to say, You're expected, not you're welcome. I knocked once and stepped inside. Vivian sat by the window, her phone on the table, untouched. Chloe stood near the minibar, sipping something citrusy from a glass with a slice of orange floating like a crown. You're late, my mother said without looking at me. I'm here, I replied. Chloe turned. You look different. Maybe I am, she smirked. Must be the estate, or the wardrobe. I didn't rise to it. I walked to the chair opposite Vivian and sat. I read your letter. Vivian finally turned her eyes on me. There was no warmth in them, but there was a quiet calculation. Then you understand what's at stake. I do, I said. You're afraid. That's what's at stake. That got Chloe's attention. Excuse me? You're afraid, I repeated, meeting my mother's gaze. Not of me. Of the fact that someone who wasn't chosen ended up being the one he chose. Vivian's lips tightened. You signed legal documents under false pretenses. And you orchestrated the deception, I shot back. Every step. You handed me the phone. You told me to mimic her voice. You trained me like I was auditioning to be your better daughter. Her expression didn't flinch, but her hands, they curled slightly in her lap. I did what was necessary to protect this family's future. No, I said, my voice steady. You did what was necessary to protect your illusion of control. Chloe stepped forward, glass in hand. Let's not rewrite the narrative here. You stepped in. No one forced you. Don't act like the victim. I'm not, I said, turning to her. But you are. You've been playing a role your whole life, and when the curtain dropped, you ran. Chloe's jaw clenched. I stood slowly. I came here today because I wanted to say it to your faces. I'm done apologizing for being the one who stayed. Vivian's voice came quieter now. What exactly do you think you've earned, Lena? Nothing, I said. That's the difference between us. I'm not trying to earn Grant's love. I just let it happen. A pause. Then she asked, You think he's going to keep you? I felt my chest tighten. Not in fear, but in certainty. I don't know, I said honestly. But even if he wakes up tomorrow and decides I'm not who he wants, at least he knew me. The real me. Not your version. Chloe walked over to the window and set her glass down. Her voice was lower now, edged with something unspoken. Do you love him? I turned to her. Yes. She didn't look at me. Even after the lie? Especially because of it. Because I had to choose to stop lying. That matters. Vivian exhaled. And if he loses everything when this goes public? The trust? The reputation? The board support? I looked her straight in the eyes. Then we start over. Together. Silence wrapped around the room like a final act lowering its curtain. I walked to the door. Wait, Chloe said, her voice softer. If he asked you today, would you stay even if he told you he didn't forgive you completely? I turned back to her. Yes, I said, because I'm not there to be forgiven. I'm there to love him. She didn't speak again. I left the room with my spine straight and my hands still shaking. Back at the estate, the sun was already starting its descent. The windows glowed warm gold. I walked through the hall slowly, each step heavier with what I'd left behind, and lighter with what I was walking toward. Grant was sitting in the music room, the piano keys quiet beneath his fingertips. He turned his head before I could speak. You went. I did. He nodded. How was it? Necessary, I said. Awful. But necessary. I stepped closer. I told them everything. That I'm not pretending anymore. That I'm not leaving. His hand found the edge of the piano. And did they believe you? I don't know, but I did. He stood slowly. And then he reached out, not hesitating, not asking, just offering. I placed my hand in his. He drew me gently forward, until we were just inches apart. Then that's all I need, he said. The moment lingered between us, not urgent, but profound. I didn't need a promise. He didn't need a performance. We just needed this. The truth. The trust. And the silence between us, finally filled with something real. A week passed. The house was quieter now, but not empty. There was a peace in the way the light moved through the windows in the morning, or how the kitchen smelled like lemon and clove by noon. I'd begun to make tea again without needing to measure. I placed it on the left now, always, and Grant never missed it. He was reading more. Not on his own. He still asked me to read aloud. Old poetry, letters from forgotten authors, the kinds of stories that didn't require perfect endings. He said my voice made the words feel lived in. Some nights he would sit at the piano and just press one key. Hold it. Let it linger until the room responded. Not music, not yet, but sound that held emotion. And I was breathing easier. I was still learning not to ask for permission to belong. But then one morning, Delilah found me in the greenhouse. Her face was calm, but her voice carried something underneath it. "There's someone here asking to see you." "Who?" She hesitated. "Brady Harris." I froze, the pruning shears in my hand suddenly heavy. Brady, Chloe's old fiancé. We'd never spoken, but I'd seen his name on headlines, heard his laugh through speakerphones, felt the weight of him in every conversation Chloe didn't want to have. He was part of the world I was never meant to be in. Did he say what he wants? No, just that it's about family business. And that it's urgent. I wiped my hands on my apron and followed her through the hall. Brady was waiting in the front parlor, standing near the fireplace like he owned the room. Tall, sharply dressed, hair too perfect to be accidental. He turned as I entered. "Lena," he said with an edge of curiosity. "Or should I say, Mrs. Callahan?" I didn't smile. "You're not here for small talk. Straight to it. I like that." I folded my arms. "What do you want?" He stepped closer, but not too close. "I'm here because Vivian is making moves, and I thought you deserved to know before things escalate." "What kind of moves?" "She's leaking information." Quietly, to the Callahan board, pressuring them to request a reevaluation of Grant's leadership, citing conflict of interest and instability. I felt my chest tighten. "She's using your story," he said. "The switch, the lie. She's positioning it as a breakdown in trust." "She was the architect of it," I said sharply. "Yes, but the board won't see it that way once she frames it as Grant being emotionally compromised." I stared at him, heat rising in my cheeks. "So why are you telling me?" He shrugged. "Because I don't like being used. Vivian used Chloe. Chloe used me. And now she's using you both. I'm not here for redemption." "But I don't owe her silence anymore." I studied him. "What do you expect me to do?" "Remind Grant what's at stake. Make him move faster. Sign the papers, secure the vote, before it's taken from him. And if I don't?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Then the next time I see you, it might be in a courtroom." He turned to go. "Brady," I said, stopping him. He glanced back. "Why do you really care?" A pause. "I don't," he said. "But I believe in paying back the people who underestimate me. Vivian's always been good at that." He left without another word. That night, I found Grant in the library, running his fingertips along the spine of a book I'd left out earlier. "Can I read you something?" I asked. He nodded. I sat beside him and opened the letter I'd written the night I returned from Peachtree Inn. I hadn't meant to read it aloud, but now it felt right. "It's not a love letter," I began, voice unsteady. "It's a confession." He didn't interrupt. I didn't know I could love someone I lied to. I didn't know love could grow in silence and guilt. But it did. Slowly. Unexpectedly. And now, I wake up hoping to hear your voice before the rest of the world fills my head. I paused, breath catching, then continued. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to believe that every moment since the truth mattered more than the lie that came before. When I finished, I closed the paper and waited. Grant reached out slowly until his hand found mine. You don't need to ask me to believe, he said. I already do. I leaned in, forehead resting against his. There's something else, I whispered. Vivian's trying to take the company from you. She's already started talking to the board. I know, he said. You do? I could feel the shift. Meetings rescheduled, emails delayed, people who stop calling without saying why. Brady told me. He said you need to move fast. He exhaled. They think blindness is weakness. That I can't see them moving. What are you going to do? He turned his head slightly. Sign the papers. Solidify my seat. End the games. I nodded. But only, he added, if you're beside me when I do. The weight of it settled between us. I'm not going anywhere, I said. He smiled, faint but sure. And in that moment, we weren't fighting a family, or a company, or even the past. We were fighting for the future. Ours. The Callahan boardroom didn't feel like a place where love stories were supposed to end or begin. But as I stood just outside its doors that morning, heart thudding in my chest, I realized this was where mine was about to be tested. The room was sleek and clinical, glass walls, chrome accents, and a long table that had hosted more negotiations than family dinners. Around it sat 11 members of the Callahan Trust, each with expressions that flickered somewhere between curiosity and quiet skepticism. Grant stood at the head of the table, his hand resting on the polished wood, cane propped beside him. He didn't need sight to command a room. His stillness did that for him. I stayed just behind him, one step to the side, close enough to support, far enough to let him lead. Vivian sat near the center, dressed in a tailored navy jacket, lips painted a shade too calm. Chloe was beside her, quiet, unreadable, legs crossed perfectly. Grant's voice broke the silence. I appreciate you all making time, he began. Today's meeting is not about questions of identity, scandal, or who married whom. It's about clarity, stability, and trust. His hand moved slightly, fingers brushing the envelope in front of him, the final draft of the restructuring agreement. For years, you've counted on me to be cautious, calculated, unshakable, and I have been. But what I haven't always been is real. He turned slightly toward me, though he couldn't see my face. I've let my fear of perception keep me from making decisions that could have changed the future for the better. That ends today. He slid the envelope across the table. I'm signing this. Now. And when I do, the trust will shift. The board will remain intact. But operational authority will move under my final direction. Vivian sat forward, fingers tapping lightly on her notebook. And we're supposed to just ignore the recent breach of identity protocol? The deception that calls your judgment into question? Grant didn't flinch. It wasn't a deception. It was a mistake, one that revealed something important. Who was willing to stay? And who was willing to run? Murmurs rose around the table. Vivian leaned back, the corner of her mouth lifting. So you're doubling down? I'm moving forward, Grant said calmly, with the person who showed up, not the one who disappeared. Chloe's voice came next, quiet but sharp. "You're making a decision with your heart, not your mind." He turned toward her. "Sometimes they agree," he said. "And when they don't, I've learned to listen to the one that stays quiet longer." Silence rippled through the room again. I stepped forward then, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. "If anyone wants to question my presence, they're welcome to," I said clearly. "But I won't apologize for standing here. I came into this with nothing to gain, and I stayed when it would have been easier to disappear." One of the board members, Mr. Haverford, I think, cleared his throat. "What exactly is your role in this now, Ms. "Lena," I said. "Just Lena, and I don't want a title. I'm not here to run a business. I'm here because this man taught me what it means to build something that matters. And I'll keep showing up. For him, for this home, for the people who trust him. Whether you put me on a letterhead or not." A pause. Then Grant picked up the pen. No flourish. No performance. Just a steady hand and a signature that said, "This is mine, and I'm not afraid anymore." The board moved quickly after that. A few hesitant nods, a few whispered side conversations. Vivian's silence was deafening, but she didn't speak again. By the end of the hour, it was done. Outside the boardroom, the hallway was flooded with sunlight. Grant and I walked slowly, side by side, the echo of our footsteps trailing behind us like a release. At the end of the corridor, he stopped. "Do you regret any of it?" he asked. I thought for a moment. Only the parts where I forgot who I was. He turned his head toward me. "And now?" "I remember. Every day." He reached out then, not to take my hand, but to rest his palm over mine, still warm from the pen he'd used moments before. "I knew they'd try to shake me," he said, "but they forgot something." "What's that?" "That I was blind long before I lost my sight. And somehow you helped me see." I couldn't speak. My heart filled my throat too tightly for words, so I just pressed his hand between both of mine and held on. Not for support, but for the beginning of something we'd finally built, not borrowed, together. The morning after the board meeting, the estate felt unusually quiet. Not empty, but reflective, like even the walls were processing what had shifted. I stood by the window in the sunroom, watching a sparrow dart between branches. The world outside moved on, soft and unbothered, but something inside me tightened, not with fear, with knowing. Because peace never holds long when unfinished truths remain. Delilah found me an hour later, her voice hesitant. "There's someone at the front gate," she said. "He's asking for Grant. And you." I turned slowly. "Who?" She hesitated. "Dr. Richard Merton, from Emory." I blinked. "The ophthalmologist?" She nodded. I didn't move. I hadn't heard that name in months. "He says it's urgent." By the time I reached the sitting room, Grant was already seated, his posture tall, cane across his lap, expression unreadable. Dr. Merton stood across from him, holding a thin manila folder and what looked like guarded hope in his hands. Grant's head lifted as I entered. "You're here." I nodded and sat beside him, offering my hand, which he took immediately. "Doctor." Merton cleared his throat. "I know this is unexpected, but I didn't want to wait until next week's appointment to discuss this." Grant's voice was calm. "Go on." "We received the results from your most recent scans. The scar tissue around your optic nerve has begun to thin, slowly but significantly. It's the first positive change we've seen in years." My breath caught. I squeezed Grant's hand. "The new procedure, What we've been testing with stem cell integration and nerve stimulation, it may actually work, Doctor. Merton continued, I'm not saying you'll regain full vision, but there's a window, a possibility. Silence followed, heavy, tangled. Then Grant asked almost softly, what's the risk? There's always risk. Surgery, recovery time. Pain, and there's no guarantee the improvement will be permanent, or even substantial. But it's more than we've ever had. Grant didn't respond right away. I looked at him, at the stillness in his face, the way his fingers had tightened just slightly in mine. Finally he spoke. And if I wait? The window might close, Dr. Merton said. This is about timing. After the doctor left, the room held a strange weight, like the very air had paused, waiting for Grant to decide what came next. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he stood and walked toward the piano, fingertips grazing the edge of the keys. I've spent years making peace with blindness, he said quietly. Learning how to move without sight, how to feel everything I couldn't see. I watched him, heart aching, and now they're offering me a window, he murmured. But what if I look through it and lose everything I've built in the dark? I walked to him slowly. You haven't built your world in the dark, Grant. You built it in truth, in choice, in love. The light won't take that away. His jaw tightened. What if I see things I don't want to? The question landed with more weight than I expected. I placed a hand on his arm. Then we'll face them. Together. He turned his head slightly, sensing how close I was. You think I should do it? I think, I said gently, that you've spent so long surviving. Maybe it's time to consider what it means to live. Even if, just for a moment, even if the light is brief. He was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, he asked, Will you come with me? I didn't hesitate. Yes. 3 days later, we were at Emory Hospital. The surgery was scheduled at dawn. He sat beside me in pre-op, dressed in pale blue scrubs, his fingers cool but steady. Do you remember what you wore the first night we met? He asked suddenly. I blinked. A yellow sweater? Too big for me. He smiled. You smelled like lavender and rain. How did you know? I didn't need eyes for that. A nurse stepped in and said it was time. I leaned in, touched my forehead to his. You don't have to see me to know I'm here, I whispered. But I hope you get to. His lips turned up at the corners. Me too. Then he was wheeled away, and I was left in the waiting room, surrounded by vending machines and cold air, and the echo of everything unspoken. It felt like hours, and then the surgeon appeared. He's in recovery, she said. We won't know the results for a while, but it went as well as we could have hoped. I nodded, chest tight, unable to speak. When they let me see him, he was still groggy, his eyes wrapped in gauze, a monitor beeping softly nearby. I sat beside him and took his hand. You made it through, I whispered. His fingers curled around mine. I know, he murmured, because you're still here. And I was. No matter what came next, I was. The hospital room was quiet, save for the soft hum of machines and the occasional distant chime of a nurse's pager. I sat by Grant's bedside, my fingers laced with his, both of us tucked in silence. 2 days had passed since the surgery. His eyes remained covered, the gauze a constant, fragile reminder that everything now balanced between possibility and disappointment. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic, but no one could promise what waited beneath the bandages. "They'll remove the dressings tomorrow morning," the nurse had said earlier, her tone careful. "That's when we'll know if there's improvement." Improvement. Such a small word for something that could change everything. I studied his face as he slept, the stillness in his brow, the rhythm of his breath. Grant had always carried his strength quietly, like a current beneath the surface. Constant, unseen, unstoppable. And yet, here he was, tethered to the hope of something he couldn't control. When he stirred, I leaned in. "Hey," I whispered. "You need anything?" He turned his head slightly toward my voice. "You're still here?" "Of course." "I had a dream," he murmured, his voice husky. "I was standing in the garden, and I saw the color yellow, not bright, but soft. Like morning." My chest tightened. "The tulips," I said. He nodded slowly. "I think it was you." I smiled faintly, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Even in your dreams, you're poetic." He chuckled softly, then winced. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, settling. "Just feels like the light is waiting." We sat there for a while longer, wrapped in the kind of quiet that only comes from shared vulnerability. I didn't ask what he feared. I knew. We both did. It wasn't the blindness, it was what came after. That night, I barely slept. I sat curled in the chair by the window, watching the moon shift its light across the floor, the city humming in the distance. Every hour, I'd check the time. Every minute felt heavier than the last. When morning finally came, the nurse entered with a cart and a gentle smile. "It's time," she said softly. Grant sat upright with my help. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled the blanket across his lap. "You ready?" I asked. "No," he admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The nurse worked in quiet precision, unwrapping the gauze slowly, layer by layer. I watched as his face was slowly revealed, the skin around his eyes pale and a little swollen. She paused. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to remove the shields now. You may feel some pressure, some burning. That's normal." I reached for his hand. He found mine instantly, gripping tight. The shields came off. Grant's eyes blinked against the filtered light of the room. He winced, then stilled. We waited. He blinked again. Then again, a long pause, and then, "Lena," he whispered. I leaned in, heart pounding. "I'm right here." He turned his head slightly. His pupils shifted. Focused. "I think I can see your outline," he said. "It's blurry, but I can see the color yellow." My breath caught. I looked down at my sweater, soft yellow, the exact one I'd worn the night I first spoke to him. I hadn't even thought about it when I dressed. "You wore it again," he said, a slow smile pulling at his lips. "I didn't plan to," I whispered, voice cracking. "I just needed something real." His eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting, straining. "I can't see your face clearly," he said, "but I can see the light behind you. I can see your hair, the way it falls over your shoulders." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "It's more than I ever thought I'd get," he said, voice breaking. "It's enough." The nurse stepped out quietly, giving us space. I reached up and placed his hand gently against my cheek. "Then let this be the beginning," I said. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not just a man rediscovering sight, but a man rediscovering wonder. and through his gaze, blurry and trembling, I saw myself more clearly than ever. Grant's sight came back slowly, like sunlight creeping through shutters, piece by cautious piece. The doctors said he'd never see clearly, not in the way he once had, but that didn't matter. What he did see, the hazy warmth of a sunrise, the silhouette of my hands holding his, was enough to shift the world under his feet. We stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. They monitored his eyes, adjusted medications, gave us pamphlets filled with charts and percentages. But all I could focus on was the way Grant studied the world now, like every glance was a first. He watched the way the curtains moved when the wind whispered through the cracked window. He ran his fingers along the worn spine of a book before asking me to read it. He stared at me, really stared, with a softness that made my chest ache. "I don't remember light feeling this warm," he said once, as I pulled the blinds open. "Maybe it's because it's not just light anymore," I said. "It's what you fought for." By the 3rd morning, they cleared him to return home. The estate greeted us with blooming dogwoods and the hush of spring stretching into its fullness. Delilah met us at the door, her usual grace laced with something like pride. Aunt Mimi had cooked. The kitchen smelled of sweet tea, rosemary, and peach cobbler. But the peace didn't last. By that afternoon, a letter arrived, unfolded, unsigned, but unmistakably from Vivian. "You may have won the vote, Grant, but the story isn't over. Chloe is meeting with a journalist. They're calling it a betrayal, a love built on a lie. She's decided not to protect you anymore." He read it silently. I watched his jaw tighten. "You think she'll really do it?" I asked. He nodded once. "She's tired of playing quiet." "And Vivian's pulling the strings?" My stomach turned. What happens if it runs? He looked toward the window, eyes tracing the edges of the magnolia tree. "Nothing we haven't already survived." "But it'll hurt, especially if it paints you as the fraud." "I don't care what people say about me," I whispered. He turned. "But I do." We were quiet after that. The kind of silence that comes when 2 people want to shield each other from something neither of them can stop. That night, I sat on the back porch alone, staring out at the water. The moon hung low, reflected in ripples that stretched to the edge of the marsh. I didn't hear the door open behind me, but I felt Grant before he spoke. "They're calling tomorrow," he said. "The reporter. She's requesting a statement." I turned toward him. "You could ignore it." "I could. But that's not who I want to be anymore." He sat beside me. "I thought regaining my sight would feel like control," he said, "like I'd finally be able to steer the ship again. But all it's done is remind me that some storms hit no matter how clear the sky is." I reached for his hand. "So what do we do?" He looked at me, his gaze steadier now, still blurry, but focused. "We tell the truth." I blinked. "You want to go public?" "I want to go honest," he said. "There's a difference." The next morning, we recorded it. Just us. No crew, no script. Grant sat in his study, a small lamp casting a soft glow over his face. He spoke first. "My name is Grant Callahan. You may know my company or my past. What you may not know is that I married someone under unusual circumstances, someone who wasn't supposed to be here." He paused. "Her name is Lena. And yes, she stood in for someone else at the beginning. But she stayed when no one asked her to. She chose truth when it would have been easier to hide. And every day since, she's chosen me. Not the idea of me, not the money, not the name. Just me." I took a breath, then looked into the camera. I didn't grow up with power. I didn't even grow up with confidence. I was told my voice didn't matter, unless it echoed someone else's. I let that control me for too long, until I met a man who saw me when he couldn't even see. We looked at each other. A long pause. Then Grant said, "We're not perfect. We're not pretending. We're just people trying to build something real. And for the first time, we're not afraid to be seen." We posted it to the company site, then to Grant's personal page. Then we waited. An hour passed, then 2. By evening, the video had been shared 38,000 times. The comments flooded in. Some were harsh, suspicious. But most were quiet, heartfelt, raw. People who had lied, loved, lost, forgiven. Delilah brought us tea just after sunset. I reached for my cup without thinking. Grant smiled. Left side. I stopped. He reached out, his fingers gently touching mine, guiding the cup into my palm. "Tea's on the left," he said softly. And I laughed, through tears this time, because for the first time in a long time, the world had finally turned right. Spring settled into the corners of the Callahan estate like it had always belonged there. Everything seemed to breathe softer now. Windows cracked open, wind gently rustling the curtains, birds carving arcs into the sky. It was a kind of peace I'd never known, one built not on perfection, but on choosing honesty every single day. But peace never walks alone. It brings echoes. We were sitting in the garden late one afternoon, Grant and I, beneath the trellis draped in wisteria. He was leaning back, eyes closed, letting the sunlight wash over his face. His vision had improved slightly since the bandages came off. Shapes were clearer now, colors brighter, though still filtered through fog. "I like this shade of purple," he murmured. "What is it again?" "Wisteria," I said. "You asked me the same thing 2 days ago." "I know." He smiled. "I just like hearing your voice when you say it." That's when Delilah appeared, holding a sleek white envelope in both hands. "This came," she said, hesitating, "from Vivian. Again." I took it slowly, the paper thick, elegant. Unnecessary. Inside was a wedding invitation. Chloe's. I stared at the calligraphy, the soft blush tones, the way our names were printed on the RSVP line like this was any other social occasion. "She's marrying Brady," I said softly. Grant turned slightly. "Let me guess. Ceremony in Charleston, waterfront. Jazz quartet and lanterns?" I managed a laugh, hollow. "Close. Tybee Island." "Oceanfront." Grant leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Did she write anything?" I shook my head. "Just RSVP by the 10th. He took the card from my hands, running his thumb over the raised lettering. "She doesn't want us there. She wants us to decline." "Then why invite us?" "Because Vivian wants the illusion of civility." I looked down. "What do you want to do?" Grant tilted his head. "What do you want to do?" I didn't answer. Later that night, as we folded laundry in the den, simple things, everyday things, he spoke again. "I'm not angry at Chloe anymore," he said. I glanced up. She did what she knew, what she was taught. Love wasn't a feeling to her. It was a transaction, an arrangement with prettier packaging. I sat beside him on the couch. "She's still trying to control the story," I whispered. Grant nodded. "But stories don't belong to people. They belong to the moments that shape them." We stayed silent for a while, the sound of the dryer thumping in the distance. Then he looked at me with something clear and unwavering in his eyes. "Come with me." "To the wedding?" "No, he said. To the lighthouse. I blinked. The one from the story your father told? He nodded. There's a place near it I used to visit as a kid. A cliff that looks out over the sea. I want you to see it. The next morning, we packed a small bag and left early, driving down the winding coast as fog lifted from the water. The roads curved gently through pine forests and sleepy marsh towns until the lighthouse appeared in the distance, rising like a sentinel from memory. We parked just before the trail and walked the rest of the way. Grant kept pace, his cane tapping rhythmically against the dirt path, the wind tossing his hair as if welcoming him back. When we reached the overlook, I gasped. The ocean stretched wide and endless, blue and bold, crashing gently against the rocks below. The lighthouse stood proud behind us, its white tower gleaming in the morning light. Grant stood still, facing the sea. This is where I used to come when I couldn't sleep, he said. After my dad died, I'd walk here at night, just to feel the wind, to remind myself the world was still moving, even when mine had stopped. I reached for his hand, holding it gently. This place feels like breath, I whispered. He nodded. That's why I brought you. We stood in silence for a long time, the kind that stretches, not awkward, but sacred. And then he turned toward me, his expression unreadable. I saw your face this morning, he said. My breath hitched. In the mirror, he continued. Not fully clear, but clear enough to know you were smiling at me while you brushed your hair. I felt my eyes fill. I don't know what I did to deserve that smile, he said, voice low. But I want to spend the rest of my life earning it. I stepped closer. You don't have to earn anything, I whispered. You just have to keep showing up. His eyes searched mine, misted and full. I'm going to ask you something, he said. I nodded, but not here. Not yet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. My heart raced. I'm not giving you this today, he said, placing it gently in my hand. But I want you to carry it, keep it, feel its weight. I looked down, lips trembling. It's a promise, he said, not of perfection, but of presence. Always. I clutched the pouch tightly, pressing it to my chest. And as the wind picked up and the lighthouse bell tolled once in the distance, I knew. We were walking into something neither of us could fully see yet, but for the first time, we weren't afraid of the view. The morning of the wedding came with a kind of silence that felt ceremonial. Not heavy, not tense. Just waiting. I sat at the edge of the bed, the small velvet pouch still in my hand. I hadn't opened it. Not once. I didn't need to. Its meaning had already wrapped itself around every word Grant and I had spoken since he gave it to me. We didn't attend Chloe's wedding. We sent flowers, white camellias and gardenias, a quiet message of peace, but no RSVP, no note. Just space. And space, sometimes, is the only kindness you can offer. Instead, we stayed home. The garden had begun to bloom in full that week, soft pastels unfolding like forgiveness. Delilah brewed tea and hummed as she worked. Aunt Mimi polished the silver, even though no one was coming over. That afternoon, Grant met me under the old oak tree. He dressed with quiet care, white button-up, sleeves rolled, light gray slacks. His hair had been freshly trimmed, and his eyes, still blurry, held more light than I'd ever seen in them. I have something for you, he said, holding out his hand. I smiled. I already have it. He shook his head gently. No. I want to give it the right way now. I opened my palm and placed the pouch in his hands. He knelt. No big speech, no performance, just a man choosing something sacred with every heartbeat. He opened the pouch, revealing a ring with a small, imperfect diamond set in brushed gold. It didn't gleam like the ones in magazines. It wasn't flashy or oversized. It was real. He took my hand, slipped the ring on my finger, and stood slowly. "I never expected to love like this," he said. "Not after losing sight. Not after losing trust. But you made it impossible not to." I blinked back the tears. "And you made it safe to be seen." He pulled me close, resting his forehead to mine. "No guests, no crowd, just us." "Just us," I whispered. We didn't have a ceremony. No vows written on fancy paper. But the words we spoke beneath that tree, with the breeze carrying them toward the marsh, felt like the only vows that ever mattered. "I promise to listen," I said. "I promise to stay," he replied. "I promise to choose you when it's easy, and especially when it's not." "I promise to see you," he whispered, "even when I can't." We kissed then, slow, certain. A quiet sealing of everything we'd been through, everything we were still becoming. The rest of the day unfolded gently. Delilah cried when she saw the ring. Aunt Mimi made a pecan pie for the occasion, though she never said the word wedding. We played old records in the den. We danced, barefoot, on the cool tile floor. Later that night, we walked down to the dock. The moon hung low, reflecting on the water like liquid silver. Fireflies drifted lazily around us, and somewhere in the distance, a bullfrog sang into the dark. We sat at the edge of the dock, legs dangling over, the breeze tousling Grant's hair. He turned toward me, eyes squinting against the glow of the moon. "I think I can see the outline of your profile," he said. "The curve of your nose, your lips when you smile." I turned to him slowly. "What does it look like?" He exhaled. "It looks like home." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world had gone quiet again, like it was listening. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What's that?" he asked. "A letter," I said. "To myself, from the night before I agreed to impersonate Chloe." His brows rose. "You wrote one?" I nodded. "I told myself it was just a game, that I wouldn't get hurt, that none of it would matter. And now?" I unfolded the letter, stared at the handwriting that looked too cautious to belong to me anymore. Then I tore it in half, then again. "It mattered," I said. "Every word I didn't mean, every truth I was too scared to say, every moment that changed me. It all mattered." He took the pieces from my hand and let them drift into the water, one by one. "Then let it be part of the story," he said softly. "But not the ending." We stayed there until the stars came out fully, until the dock cooled beneath us, until the quiet wrapped itself around our shoulders, like a promise. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper in the dark, a hand reaching back without being asked. A flawed diamond in a simple band, the T always on the left. And sometimes it's a blind man seeing the one thing he never needed eyes for. Me, us, the truth we built, not despite the lies, but beyond them. And it was enough. Always would be. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way.